Jim, of course, a legendary investor. Jim, can I start off by asking you why you think the equity markets are not responding to the stabilization plans that are being introduced around the world at the moment?
Because they're absurd. Jeff, we have people, if I had come on your show every week for 100 weeks in a row and everything I said to you was wrong, would you keep me on your show? Would you have any confidence in me? Would you listen to me? Mr. Paulson, Mr. Bernanke, and the guy at the New York Fed, Tim somebody, every week they have been dead wrong. Why would you listen to them? I wouldn't listen to them.
Jim, but we are where we are, and
let people go bankrupt, then you will hit bottom, and then you will start over. The people who are sound will take over the assets from the people who are unsound, and we will start over. This is the way the world has worked for a few thousand years.
Yeah, but Jim, we don't want to go back to Depression-era economics just because we cannot manage an orderly deleveraging of the financial economy.
Jeff, we had the worst excesses we've had in the credit markets in world history. You think we just wake up one morning and say, oh, well, we had a horrible, horrible period of excess, and now everything's okay, we're just going to ignore that? We're going to have to take some pain. Jeff, never before in world history were people able to buy houses with no money down. Many people bought 4 or 5 houses with no money down and no job. And then they did it with cars and student loans and credit card loans. You think we just say, well, that's too bad, we're going to start over, nobody loses his job? Jeff, be realistic.
Jim, what do we need from our G7 leaders this weekend?
Well, what they need to do is, go down to the bar and have a beer and leave the rest of us alone. Let the people who are sound succeed and let the other people fail. And Jeff, what I'm afraid of is they're going to keep doing what they've been doing, which the market hates. You can see the market hates it, because this is going to unleash rampant inflation around the world, rampant confusion in the currency markets, and you're going to have currencies gyrating all over the world. Bond markets are going to start to collapse, and then we're going to have a real problem. And that's why the stock market understands this. They're unleashing a inflationary holocaust because they don't know what else to do, and they're making mistakes.
What do you think?
How much money does the Federal Reserve have? I know they can run the printing presses forever, but that is not good for the world. Inflation is not good for the world. A collapsing currency is not good for the world. It means worse recession in the end. Remember that this is what the Federal Reserve did in the 1970s. They just printed money. We had huge recession. We had huge inflation. And then we had to bring in Paul Volcker and say, okay, solve the problem. He had to take interest rates to over 20% to solve the problem. That's what's going to happen again. The Japanese tried to do the same thing, Richard and Maria and everybody. Back in the early 90s, they said, we're not going to let anybody fail. We're going to prop everything up. 18 years later, Japan is still trying to solve its problems because they made exactly the same mistakes that the Federal Reserve is making now.
Jim, I'd like to get your thoughts on this because I take issue with one statement you're making, because the Fed's move isn't really adding any cash into the market. It's adding treasuries, which has a very different effect. But I will ask you this. What would be the first 2 things you would do if you were in Mr. Bernanke's seat tomorrow morning?
I would abolish the Federal Reserve and I would resign. Step 1 is abolish the Fed, and step 2 is resign.
How would this help the 300 million Americans that you say aren't being helped out by the Fed's activities yesterday?
Then we don't have anybody printing money. We don't have inflation in the land. We don't have a collapsing U.S. dollar. We start to have a sound currency again, and we start to get rid of inflation. Inflation is not good for the world. No country in the world has ever succeeded by debasing its currency. That's what this man is trying to do. He's trying to debase the currency as a way to revive America. It has never worked in the long term or the medium term.
But, Jim, absent of getting rid of the Federal Reserve, let's talk about real solutions here. What would you be doing instead of, printing money? How do you get out of this credit crunch? How do you, put liquidity into the system then if that's what they feel is the only solution here?
Maria, what is so wrong with a recession? It can cost you more to try to prevent a recession than it does to have a recession. We've been having recessions for hundreds of years. Recessions are good. They clean out the excesses. You start again from a sound foundation, and then you go again. It's like a forest fire, Maria. Nature invented forest fires to clean out the underbrush so that a forest can then revive and grow on a sounder foundation. Spending all this money trying to prevent a recession is making it worse, and we're going to have a worse recession in the end.
What about the policing of the investment banks?
More regulation. You want Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke? These are the guys who got us into this situation. They're supposed to be regulating the banking system for the past 50 years. These are the guys who let it all happen. I don't want more regulation. Let the market regulate it. If XYZ needs to go bankrupt, let them go bankrupt. I promise you. That will send a very strict signal, and you'll have a lot of self-regulation when these guys start going bankrupt. But letting the regulators come in and say, okay, we're going to bail you out if you'll do what we say, that's not going to solve the problem. We have the same problem again, and that's not good for America.